everybody. My name is Emma Walker. I'm the education director at ARI. So I oversee our recreational and professional programs. And um, that means I get to interact with the public in scenarios like this, where we bring in some of our partners to talk about a variety of topics. This is the first time we're offering this free Tuesday night education series. It's been really well attended so far. Really excited to see a ton of folks here, excited to advance their Avalanche education. So tonight, I'm really excited to have Howie from Recco with us. Howie has a really extensive background in the Avalanche industry, particularly in the ski area and ski patrol world. So if you have skied at a ski area, if you skied at Alta, you have something in common with Howie. So excited to hear a little bit more from him about his background and about Recco in particular, about this really fascinating technology. Howie's going to walk us through a bit about what happens in an avalanche rescue and talk about the differences between a companion rescue and an organized rescue and sort of what that means for you as a recreationist. And then we'll have some time for questions afterwards. So just so folks know, this meeting is being recorded. I won't use names when I ask questions to folks, or when I pose your questions to Howie, but just so you know, you're part of a recorded webinar, and we're going to post this on our YouTube channel later so that folks can continue to participate. At any time, in just a moment, I will turn on the chat, and at any time, you're welcome to drop questions either into the Q&A or the chat. And at the end, when Howie's finished with his presentation, I'll moderate some questions and pose those to Howie, and we'll get through as much as we can. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and end our poll and turn it over to you, Howie. Let's see. Okay. All right, Howie, it's all you. I'm going to mute and turn off my video, and I'll be here for tech support and to moderate questions.
Okay, that's great. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. I know that everyone is always busy, and it's always nice to be able to talk to a group of folks about avalanches. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in the Salt Lake area and ended up being at Alta, Utah for over 40 years on the patrol, 30 of those years the assistant director of the Avalanche program there. And that's when I got involved with rescue. And I've been with rescue with Recco for many, many years in the field of watching them grow up and develop. And tonight, we're going to start a little bit differently and talk about companion rescue. And companion avalanche rescue, and organized avalanche rescue are two different things. And we kind of fit right now, Recco kind of fits in at the organized avalanche rescue part of things. But I think it's really important too to separate the two, and you'll hear it over and over again about companion rescue. And if you're working, playing, or living in avalanche country, it's pretty important that you know how to rescue one another. This is a graph that was made some time ago, but it's still really relevant to what goes on.
Howie, sorry, we can't see. I don't know if you've shared your screen yet. I can't see your slides.
Okay, I'll try it again. Okay.
All right. Yeah, now we can see. Awesome. Thank you.
Are they there now?
Yep, we should be all set now. And somebody just put in the chat and they can see as well. So we're good to go. Thanks, Howie.
Well, there's all you've missed so far. Anyway, we're going to talk about the companion rescue first, and then go into organized rescue, and then a little information about Recco. Companion rescue, you can see by this graphic, is really important if you're not in a developed ski area that has rescuers basically at the top of every lift. It's really important. You'll hear transceiver, probe, and shovel, and that's the basic things you need when you're playing in avalanche country. And it doesn't matter whether it's a motorized sport or a split board or snowboarding, skiing. You all have to have a little bit of education and practice to be a good companion rescue person. You can see as the survival rate's pretty dismal here after 30 minutes of you being completely buried in an avalanche. What's happening with the middle arrow here where it says the potential to decrease burial time, Recco detector and other organized rescue tools are certainly doing that, and that's because of the alerting that happens so much earlier nowadays with all the different technical communication devices we have. And then, of course, the last one, the organized with probe lines, an hour I think is a pretty good time that you'd that you'd make to have a big organized rescue out working at that point. It's usually a little bit longer, I would say. The companion rescue basics, we always talk about it, about the beacon, probe, and shovel. I call it a transceiver now because there's beacons that we use too in the backcountry. And these are great tools. They're necessary tools. But boy, I'll tell you what, the first thing that happens, even if you have these tools, is to get educated. And that's why I'm really happy to be talking here tonight. And I'm glad that you're joining us for this conversation because if it's your first exposure to it, or even you've been exposed to it, you'll hear rescue talked about a little bit differently, and hopefully you'll get some more classes. You know, after you get the minimal education, even if it's self-taught, you have to practice and practice and practice. It's the only way you're going to get good with these tools. And that doesn't just include the avalanche transceiver, it includes how you shovel. And I'm sure those of you that have had more than one rescue class, shoveling is a really big part of having a successful save. And, you know, after you practice and practice and practice, I know a lot of people do it on their lawn in the fall, and they do it in the parking lots during the winter, or they'll just go to a ski area and you'll see them playing leapfrog and practicing with it. That's great. But you also need to train in the avalanche terrain where you travel, work, and play. It's a low hazard day. Maybe the skiing or the snowmobiling isn't so good that day. And you go, hey, you know what? Why don't we go see? Let's go see where the cell phone signal is in this canyon. Let's go and set up a scenario where we like to always do lap after lap and we work out into the bowl where we're standing. Why don't we see if we have a cell phone signal at that point? And then you go ahead and you do a transceiver practice where you actually are usually recreating or working. You're going to be leaps and bounds ahead. Here's our stack of cell phones. Cell phones are great if they're charged up, and also great if you have service. So I think it's once again, I can't tell you enough how we've heard stories of people going, well, the avalanche happened and I was on the ridge and I knew there was a full signal there. So I dialed 911 as I got my transceiver out and I took off. Well, that's somebody that's really prepared. And to get the alert out early to the organized rescue group, even if the person's not buried, but there's a medical problem, it just speeds everything up if you do need help. All these different tools we have are kind of like the rescue tools that us professional rescuers have too, where you have communication devices like the inReach, Spot that isn't always a two-way device, and also the satellite phone. So there's all these different tools now we have to get the word out easy. Something else that I think we don't talk about much in uh, companion rescue, and that is to make a plan. And that plan should probably be made, especially if you're with a constant group of 4 or 5 people. Maybe some of you do make rescue plans. Some of that might be at the top of the ridge. Some of that might be at the bottom of the drainage in the parking lot, and you're getting on a snowmobile, and you go, okay, we're going to go up the drainage like we have the last couple weeks, and we're going to ride, and this is where we'll regroup. And if you have a rescue plan, if something does happen and there is an avalanche, having that plan in place and kind of know uh, who's going to do what in the group, that's really important. If you're on top of the snow and you're in the group, you're the most qualified to take care of the medical needs of somebody else. I'll keep searching. And just what ifing it and talking about the plan makes a surprising difference when you actually have to use it. Here's a group of people and they've made a plan. They're doing a search. Somebody's doing the finite move with the transceiver, and somebody else is getting the probe ready. They've probably talked about it, and they're going to take care of things a lot faster if they've decided who's doing what chore. Once again, here you are, you're just uncovering somebody, and the person probably that has had the most first aid experience is hopefully still one of the rescuers, and hopefully that skill set is put to work sooner than maybe somebody else might be continuing with the transceiver search. So that companion rescue with a group of people is more almost like an organized rescue group, especially if you've talked about it, you've done some scenarios and trained for it. This is where we have to really talk about the risk taking and the things that go on when an avalanche does happen and you're with one other person. And I think it's super important that when you're skiing with just one other person, especially if you're doing it all the time, and you understand each other, and also you've practiced, and you both know how to use the transceiver, you both know how to use the shovel. It's really important that happens. I kind of put this in there. I think here's a person digging in some debris, and you know, without having friends around and any other help, you got to believe that your skills have got to be really fine-tuned in this companion rescue scenario. You know, I could talk about companion avalanche rescue all night, but my host, Ari, does a great job. And I can tell you, get your phones out. And if you haven't already been there, this QR will take you right to it. And Margaret and Liz do a great job with a free video that's there, kind of explaining the basics and going through it. And they even have a second one where Liz and Duncan are working with snowmobiles and giving you an introduction to companion avalanche rescue. And I think these are really valuable to look at if you have not had a course. Maybe if you've had a course and it's been a couple years, go look at it again. And that's kind of where I'm going to end with companion avalanche rescue, because these people know how to deal with it and know how to teach it. We're going to go to organized avalanche rescue now. And you can see all the different components we have going there. And if you look at it and you see the transceiver, the Recco, the avalanche dog, the probe lines, snowmobiles to get there. Who knows, it might be a snowmobile avalanche, but all these different things are taking place at the same time. And this is to tell you that Recco is not a replacement for being able to be observant and for walking through avalanche debris and trees and looking for a pole, looking for a glove, looking for a foot sticking out at the same time you're using your technology. The dogs can work around with the Recco just like the transceivers can. Transceivers and Recco detectors have to have a little bit of space, but the Recco is out there looking for Recco reflectors. And that's the important part. And probe lines are another really good ingredient that has to take place sometimes if you can't be found with electronic means or the dog. There's a couple, four shots here, four graphics. Good friend and colleague of mine. Some of you probably might have even had a class from Dale Atkins, and he's made these drawings, and it almost fits into a companion rescue if you have a group of 4 or 5 people. So I thought these were really good to capture both things we're trying to do tonight. We're trying to talk about companion and organized rescue. And you can see that the last seen area of the 2 tracks coming in, that's LSA. Last seen area of skier, boarder, person 1 and 2. And they're already deciding, okay, we got to figure out how many people. Is there any danger above me? I don't want to become buried by a secondary avalanche. Where do I go? So as you're walking along the debris, you're trying to figure out an escape route. You're going to try to tell other people a safer way in. And right away, the transceiver search is going to start along with the Recco, because it's one of the primary tools that goes out now, not just at ski areas, but in and around ski areas. And also search and rescue groups have it too. It's not companion rescue, but it's going to get there quickly. And you can see the dog at the bottom, and then the staging area. And something else, as an organized rescuer that's come into a lot of companion rescue situations that were underway, it really makes a big difference if you can think about it, or you've already found the person and you want the area looked at, to have the equipment not on the debris. I know that's unrealistic to think about in a companion rescue situation, but maybe you're out there, you have a signal from a transceiver, and the organized rescue crews getting there. It's really helpful to know if that is on a person or was on a person, or is one of the rescuers that's working. The next phase happens as you get more people power in there. The transceiver search will be done if it's not completely finished. The Recco search is going to continue. There's going to be at least 3 passes that the Recco detector operator is going to do. One's kind of a broad pass. The next one's a gridded pass that's pretty strategic depending on the complexity of the terrain. And then the last one's going to be a really small grid on full power and really slow. And that's kind of what goes on in the rescue world. Once the transceivers all go pronounced by the immediate search leader, who's overseeing all these skill sets being done, along with the avalanche dog, the transceivers will go back to transmit. And by then you're getting probably more people in. You can see the spot probing, and spot probing with organized rescue groups usually starts with the initial search, especially if there's no one at the scene and no witnesses. Spot probing is a really good thing to practice. If you are practicing with a smaller group that you ride with or ski with, it's really worthwhile having something like a backpack you can bury in a scenario you set up to practice and train in, to be able to recognize humps of debris, backsides of trees and stuff, where people are doing the transceiver search and you're going to the probable areas where the snow stacked up or in the line of flow with equipment from the skier that was caught in the slide. You'll be able to probe possible areas, and that's a real good use of your time. By the time it's a full-blown rescue and it's hit that mark where there is somebody that possibly is missing, or somebody that's known to be missing, and the dog hasn't alerted to anything, the Recco search is done, the spot probing is done, That's when the mechanical probing starts. By then, typically in an organized rescue, uh, the helicopters are there, and there'll be an LZ bringing other people and equipment in, and also a medical team to be staged to help anyone that is injured. You can see in every single one of those, the escape arrows, the escape route arrows never go away. You got to keep that in mind, even if you're in this fourth response and you're just in the backcountry riding your sled somewhere, or touring and there's a rescue going on. You don't want to take everybody's word. You always go for your own observations and make sure that you're dialed in. So we went over companion rescue and we went over organized rescue. And this is a large avalanche. And you can see how long that takes and how tough it is. And I put these both up there with the single companion rescuer looking at it, their transceiver and having their probe pole. And at least with that, it's going on. And hopefully he's having a signal, he or she is having a signal come from another transceiver. And if they're not, it's going to turn into a probing affair. The take-home point from both rescue sides are to be searchable. And yes, the avalanche dogs are great. They get a lot of fines. Yes, transceivers are great. And it's just good to be searchable with some electronic means. And that's where transceivers and also the Recco reflectors and the Recco detectors come in. It's a much better option than the probe lines of an organized rescue. And could you let me know if you hear the audio on this, Emma?
Not hearing any audio, Howie.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about the Recco system now. And this is actually making the sound of a reflector. And it's too bad our audio doesn't work there, but the reflection is pretty obvious if you've ever heard it before getting used. And there's two parts to the system. Those of you who aren't familiar with Recco, Recco is a passive transceiver. That's the first part of the system. And it's installed in over 150 brands of clothing and footwear, helmets, all sorts of different articles now. And it doesn't need a battery. It's always on. It can't be turned off. It doesn't require a battery. And it's really pretty tough. It's really tough. And we'll typically be working when the garment's ready to get recycled. And also, the other thing, a lot of people think it's the same as an RFID chip. It's not a chip, it's actually a passive transponder. It's an antenna with a diode in it. And what it does is it just reflects the signal back to the detector. It's a completely analog system, so there's no information on it. Big Brother's not watching you if you have a Recco reflector on. And the story's great. The story's great. It's turned 40 years old this year and or last, and it's been quite an evolution of technology. You can see back in 1983, it weighed over 32 pounds. You got about 10 meters of range out of it. And that being said, there were very few reflectors around, and still in 1987 was its first live rescue and find. In 1997, it shrunk down quite a bit as the technology got more advanced. Everything became smaller, like we saw it happen with our personal computers. We saw it happen with cell phones, and we've seen it happen with our rescue tools. Now it's pretty much a standard avalanche rescue tool worldwide. It's in 30 countries. It only weighs about 2 pounds. The practical range is doubled at 20 meters. And it's just a complement to transceivers, avalanche dogs, and probe lines. And it's really important you understand that. As a rescue worker, you always think that everything's going to be the next best thing, and Recco's never treated it that way. We're just another tool in the box for rescue workers to work with, and I think that's been the start of this, and it is the way it's going still. This kind of shows the motion of everyone moving at once and working together. The transceiver and the Recco can be fairly close together. The dog can range where the handler wants it to range, and certainly the electronic search devices can work around the dogs, as well as working around the probe line. With an avalanche this big, you can see the probe line there. I would say they're probably doing probable spots just by looking at stuff. It's not so much a spot probe as much as it's an organized probe in a likely place where the buried person could be. The detector network is huge in all over the place. Like I said, in 30 countries, and being in 900 ski resorts and search and rescue organizations with 2,200 detectors, the first question I get a lot when we talk about this is, well, what happens when I go to Europe? What happens when I go to South America? What happens when I go to Japan? Well, where all those detectors are, the reflector you have in your garment or your equipment is going to reflect with that technology. So it doesn't matter where you are in the mountains. If you're in the mountains and you have a Recco reflector and there's a detector around, that's gonna be the combination, and hopefully it'll come in handy. Hopefully you never need it. It's pretty impressive to think during this time that over 15,000 professional rescuers are trained to use the technology. Along with that, the rescue partners are really big, and that's organizations that recognize it, that represent a lot of people, both rescue people and also people that recreate, and they realize the value of having a Recco reflector worn by people and having a rescue Recco detector in your rescue organization and people trained how to use it is a good thing. And it's great to have everybody's support. I'm going to just touch for a minute on the Recco SAR helicopter detector. It came to North America in 2018, started out in Europe a little bit sooner than that. And it's really helped Recco morph from an avalanche rescue tool to a year-round search tool. And it's really cool. And it's amazing how well it works and consistently so far how well it's worked to locate people in the outdoors. It had the same technology challenges that the handheld detector had. You can see back, I'm not quite sure how long ago it was in the 80s or early 90s. The helicopter on the left, that's the size of the detector, almost half the size of the airframe. Then the next one with Zermatt was shaped kind of like an airplane. You can kind of see it lower on the long line beneath there. These devices can be underneath the helicopter on the belly hook with the long line, and they can also be dispatched and deployed from the hoist, the rescue hoist on helicopters. The far right frame is the shape and size of it now, and that's what's hanging behind me. It's great for glaciers. It's great for forests. It's good for mountains. Scree slopes is another in real rocky terrain. It's really tough to see people that are in the rocky terrain, but when they have a reflector on, it's amazing how quickly they become visible. Recco does not work underwater, so that's something you should be aware of. And the big question is, well, water, snow. It has even really hard avalanche debris, really dense avalanche debris has a lot of air in it, and the Recco reflection uh, travels through it nicely. I don't have sound, but you can watch this little grid going on. It's the same as when you're on foot searching, and the helicopter sets up a grid. They have a lot of them have a lot of really good GPS tracking software, so they can tell exactly where they've searched. And if you're 100 meters above ground level, then that means your flashlight, or let's call it the Recco detector signal, is going 300 feet wide. So your height above the ground level is equals the amount that you're painting the surface of the earth with the Recco signal. So what that allows you to do at 60 miles an hour is actually search 30 football fields a minute. And that's shown nicely by the grid on the picture on the left. And I should say speeds up to 60 miles an hour. And if we had the audio, basically, right now I'm hearing the reflector come back, and that signal getting reflected back to the detector beneath the helicopter. And it's just like the handheld. Once you have the signal, because it's not transmitting, it's not powered, it's just reflecting, just like having a flashlight shining into a mirror, comes right back into your eyes. You can go directly to that point where the signal is the strongest. And that's where you'll probably find the detector. The detectors, it's a newer program. Like we said, we have 8 in the United States, 5 in Canada. These maps are always changing, so we're adding to them quite a bit in over 30 in Europe now. And this network is just going to build out. There's already one over in Eastern Canada, and hopefully we're going to be in all the mountainous areas in the United States eventually. Oh, I might add too, if you go to recco.com and you go to network, you got to scroll down a little bit once you hit the network button, and you'll get to an interactive map. And if you're traveling somewhere in the United States or anywhere in the world, the interactive map is really neat because you can go to wherever the rescue organizations are, and you can zoom in to see if there's a detector there. And also there's some filters on the side. So you can turn off all the search and rescue and just see the ski resorts, or you can take those and turn both those off and you'll just see the helicopter bases where the detectors are located. So that's just a little tip. It's a great tool, and I use it myself. So anyway, it's important that you know we call it the Recco ecosystem, and you can see consumers at the top of this triangle. Everyone, including the consumers, are partners in rescue. That's what Recco is, and that's how it's built. And to tell you about the search and rescue groups being one leg, and the outdoor brand partners uh, integrating the reflectors. It's the sale of reflectors actually subsidize the cost and development of all these detectors. The income that the company makes from that supports development of Recco technology and the expansion and all the training of the new helicopter search and rescue bases, as well as search and rescue teams. we're bringing on search and rescue teams all the time in ski resorts. Still, ski resorts are still getting signed on to it. And the interesting part about this whole equation is I got the best job in the world. I get to talk to fine folks like you, and I don't have to sell anything because the detector equipment isn't for sale. The SAR groups and the helicopter groups don't buy the detectors. They always stay property with within Recco. So that's kind of important to know. And also, this is, of course, not all 150 brands, but uh, I leave it up just for a second here. So those of you who don't think you have a reflector in any of your clothing or gear, if you see any of these brand names and you have some at home, you should go check it out. Of course, the type of equipment and the brands are expanding. The brands that have been in the winter sports, Avalanche and winter rescue mode are also now embracing it and putting it in more of the summer, springtime, fall mode. We have camouflage clothing manufacturers for hunting that are integrating reflectors now. Same with footwear. We're going into some hiking shoes and boots just for hiking, climbing harnesses, and helmets have gone from snowboard and ski helmets to bicycle helmets. So the the whole idea here is to have as many people searchable for people like me to find as we can, and that's kind of what we're after. There are some standalone Recco reflectors out there, and they either can stick to a helmet uh, or they have a little piece of cloth like the backpack reflector where you can put it somewhere high up on the pack, not on the front straps. And those are available if you don't have any Recco in your closet. It's pretty simple here. The mission is to have everyone in the outdoors searchable. And it not only helps rescuers save lives, but kind of my pitch here is I've had a lot of friends in the rescue business for a lot of years, and it's always been sad to have somebody you know or even know of in the rescue world get seriously injured or killed while they're on search missions. And I kind of look at this uh, contribution that Recco is doing there is the more people we have searchable, the less rescuers, volunteer and professional rescuers out there for hours and hours and days on end looking for someone that's missing when possibly a helicopter with the Recco detector on it could fly through 20 square miles in that time and have already found the person. So that's that's why I'm in it, and that's why I hope that everyone that hears me talk finds out if they're searchable. And one of the things too that uh, I guess to kind of wrap up here is so many people have reflectors and they never tell anyone. So it's really important because if you don't come home from a ski trip and you weren't going anywhere avalanche prone, you thought, um, and they come and talk to your friends or your next of kin, they're going to ask, are they searchable? Or they're going to ask, have you seen this logo? Do you know if they have Recco? And that's going to change the response of a lot of search and rescue organizations, especially in the mountainous terrain year round now. So that's something to think about. If you do have Recco reflectors, make sure you let people know about it. And I'll tell you what, uh, after 40 years, to have Magnus Gronhead still involved and still making a difference. And for those of you who can't read this, I try to get through it without getting too emotional. But Magnus says it is a great advantage to be able to live off your idea, but it is nothing compared to meeting someone who tells you they are alive because of your idea. And that's kind of the ethos of Recco, you know. It's it's really great. And I think the other thing as a rescuer, I'd like to close with is that since the day in the mid '90s I got involved with Recco, um, I'll tell you, it's it's been a treat with how much in the early '90s or the late '90s, early 2000s that they really pushed Avalanche education. They came out with something called the White Book, and they've been educators since I've known them, ever since it started. And so that it's great having the tie with organization like ARI, and it was great having you listen to me tonight. And if you have any questions, Emma will be glad to answer them. I'm out of here.
Thanks, Howie. That was awesome. Thanks for the
You
overview.
betcha.
Really good information to have and appreciate some of those, like some of the more technical aspects are really interesting. And despite having been in this world a while, I learned some stuff too. So really appreciate that. We do have one question in the chat, and folks, please feel free to drop other questions in the chat or the Q&A. But a question that came in a few minutes ago from somebody wondering, given that most people carry a smartphone with them, even in the backcountry, curious about using portable mobile phone receivers to triangulate on a person's smartphone to find a precise location and whether that's been investigated. I have a hunch on that, and Howie, I'll have you chime in as well. But the big problem with using mobile phones for things like that is one thing we know about smartphones that you've probably seen on your own, folks, is that batteries in smartphones don't last that long when it's cold, and they particularly don't last that long when it's cold and they're searching for a signal. So if you can imagine, like on a cloudy day, our satellite phone even has a hard time getting a signal out, and so when you're buried under all of that snow, the transmission is really tough, and particularly if you're in an area that doesn't have great cell coverage, your phone's working really hard to send that signal out, and so that just kills your battery life. So even with a fully charged phone, you may only have a couple hours in a really cold, like in an avalanche burial situation. So that to me, that's the first thing I think of by the time we'd be able to get that kind of technology out there, your phone may very well have died. And so even though a precise location would be great, it maybe isn't something that your phone would last long enough to do. Unlike these Recco detectors, which can find Recco that there's no batteries, they don't die. So I don't know how is that in line with your thinking on that, or am I forgetting anything?
It is. I think the idea of triangulation and technology. I don't know if we're going to get down if the technologies are to have a form factor of something like even you probably wouldn't want to take a Recco detector on your backpack with you, even though it's only 2 pounds. And I mean, I can put it in my coat and carry it and deal with it. But as far as the triangulation, there are devices now in rescue helicopters, and they actually can triangulate without having a cell network. Okay, and so that there are just a few organizations that have it right now, and they also have Recco. So it's the Recco detector in the helicopters also just like in rescue, where just because you have a Recco detector in the helicopter, you still have your infrared camera, candlelight spotlight, and now a cell phone detector and other tools that you're gonna always use looking for missing people. So I'm totally in your camp about batteries, and that's kind of like make the companion rescue plan. It's like, hey, if there's two of you, turn your other phone off and keep it in your chest pocket, you know? and you only have to have one pocket, one phone on. If you have a big group, decide that you're gonna change who has an active phone on, especially if you're in a cell country. And that'll always keep a fresh phone around. But people forget, number one, to bring them because they're still in the car, and number two, to charge them the night before. Or they charge them the night before, and you got an hour and a half to the trailhead, and you're doing all your stuff, and you get there, and you know, I burn my battery out just navigating, you know.
As
So,
someone who is almost always guilty of having a nearly dead cell phone.
That's
Got
classic.
another
Yeah.
question here from somebody wondering how often Recco tags need to be replaced, or do they?
Reflectors will usually outlast the life of the garment, and it's like any sort of uh, device where you could see the thinness of it. The whole idea is to keep it light. Like there's a lot of reflectors now that are in the brim of untouchable hoods on the jacket, and also right at the back of the neck. And you shouldn't have to think about replacing them. If you have a jacket, somebody came and they had a Jean-Claude Keely one-piece suit from the 70s, well, the 80s probably, and they had a big Recco, and the Recco reflector was about 4 inches long at that point, and they wanted to know if it still worked, and it did. But if you do have Recco in your clothing, the next time you're by a ski area, or you're in a ski area, you can always say, hey, I ran over this with my truck this morning. Could you make sure it's still working? So that's something, and you get a little detector action too then.
Awesome. Thanks, Howie. Okay, got a couple more. I'm just gonna keep firing them at you if that's okay. Um, let's see. I've got somebody who's wondering they snowboard and ride a timber sled or snow bike, and they're wondering if the best place if they're to get a Recco tag, where would be the best place to put that? They're thinking, they might switch which backpack, helmet, jacket they're using, but they'll always wear the same transceiver. Would a transceiver harness be an okay place to put that Recco tag?
Yeah, it would. I think that the transceiver harness is good, but because Recco doesn't work in water, you always want to leave it in a place where your body's not going to completely cover the reflector, where it's not so much going to keep it from functioning, but the probabilities of detection go down uh, the more confined space surrounded with water that you end up with. So I think I don't know if you change helmets, um, I would just I would get a reflector for each helmet. Yeah, because the helmet you're always going to have on when you're riding, I would think, especially a snow bike. It's like, so I would suggest you outfit both helmets.
So the idea then being that, if you've got it, say, on your transceiver harness, that would be something that the configuration that you're buried in could potentially block that signal from being able to be picked up, whereas it matters less if it's on your helmet, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like the other thing about it's so directional too that the helmet, the back of the neck, um, it it's good because it's closer to your airway.
Yeah.
If somebody with a detector is going to find you, it
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
you
going to
want that
go
airway out first.
really close.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's another question from somebody who's wondering kind of what the status and what the relationship is between Recco and national parks in the US. So do you have an agreement with national parks that if there's a search and rescue situation, how does that work? How do you get called into a search and rescue situation somewhere like a national park?
As far as national parks, there are certain parks that have an agreement, and they do have a detector, and they do search with it. And we don't make a decision for any search and rescue team or any sort of rescuer that is trained with the Recco, and particularly with the helicopter detector. It is completely up to the rescue people in that organization whether or not they're going to use it. With the national parks, we aren't in many of them yet. We've been in some and back out, but they're definitely requesting detectors every year and the training that goes with them. So I would think the national parks too, particularly now that it's year round and there's a lot of people go missing in the summer. It's going to be a good tool to have in our national parks.
Yeah, certainly. All right, next question. Someone's wondering if there's any concerns with airport security with Recco. Is that going to give you any trouble in the TSA line?
I don't know. They already know where you are. No, you know what? I've always, anything that I have a reflector on, including my belt. I have a Recco belt with a couple reflectors on it. It comes off anyway, and they
Yeah.
X-ray it, and we know X-rays don't hurt it. So, yeah, I would say if you had it on in a light piece of clothing, like there's actually mountain biking attire now that has reflectors uh, uh, on their sleeve. So it's yeah, you could have it, but I don't. It's just going to make the security device go off, and they'll just look at it. I don't think you'd have any problem with it. And
Yeah.
I have it on all the time, and I do a lot of flying, and it just
Yeah.
goes through the X-ray machine.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, anecdotally, I have a number of jackets with Recco in them. And I usually try to just carry on whenever I can, and I've never been pulled aside in a TSA line. So there's one data point for you, but and it sounds like there's no issue with that deteriorating the quality of the um deteriorating the quality or the ability of the tag to do its job.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Um, and then Um, let's see. Do you have a sense of about how many SAR teams in, say, like in Colorado have a Recco detector or use that in the course of a typical search?
Oh yeah, yeah. Every major ski area and quite a few search and rescue organizations. And once again, I'll tell you what, instead of guessing, go to recco.com and go to network, and you can just have Colorado there and turn off the ski areas and just look at the SAR groups and then turn on the ski areas. And by the way, I did mention that map to you. When you do zoom in and look at like your state of Colorado that you're curious about, all you have to do is mouse over the icon and it's going to tell you the organization. You don't have to click on it or anything. So it makes it really easy to cruise around and see if you're familiar with the organization, that you hope has a detector.
Right. I just went ahead and dropped that link in the chat that Howie just mentioned. So folks are curious, you can click that to check out the network. Okay, couple more. We've got time for like two, three more questions. Another person is asking if you have clothing that has a tag in it, is there any problem with washing and or drying that clothing?
The Recco development uh, people in Sweden work with all the product development people at the brands. And depending on the placement, where it goes, what type of clothing it's in, and all that, uh, typically, if you're following the care instructions on the tag, there shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, great. So
So,
following
yeah, read those tags that we all cut off as soon as we buy something.
the first thing I do.
I
Uh,
know, I know.
Another question, someone's asking what's limiting the rapid expansion of helicopter detector use by SAR? Curious, I think maybe a way to phrase this question or to think about this would be if you've got a detector, it still takes a long time to cover a large area. So I'm assuming that that's part of it, right? Is that those helicopter hours are unbelievably expensive, and depending where you are, they may cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars an hour. So I'm guessing that's probably got something to do with why anytime somebody goes missing, we're not out there with a Recco detector like the minute they go missing because it's so expensive and we want to hone in on that area. Any other insights there, Howie, that might be kind of limiting that expansion of that use?
Well, what's really cool that's happening in the United States is it's really something that hasn't been around a long time, and it just coincided kind of in 2018 when I started uh, figuring out how to build a network here in the United States, and that is there's more rescue helicopters, and the helicopter detector weighs two. This is 200 pounds right here, right? And so it's 200 pounds, and it takes quite a bit of training, and it takes also a certain type of helicopter crew that is used to that sort of thing. So uh, about all of the detectors that are placed around the planet are with rescue helicopters, and these are not so much the air ambulances, and it's got to you got to have an external load uh, get up, whether it's the belly hook underneath the helicopter or the actual hoist. And also, it's a program that's getting developed slowly, and it's not like we have a production with a huge warehouse full of helicopter detectors. And it takes time to figure out where the next best home is.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's pretty deliberate, and it's really great. And we're trying to get as many out there as we can is the really short answer. It's just it takes time like building anything from the ground up.
Great. Yeah. Okay, last question. Um, Somebody's asking, is there any chance we'll see like a recreational size detector, something that would be, somebody could carry backpacking, or is this current kind of 1 kilogram unit? Are we nearing the limits of what's physically possible to shrink down?
I can put that picture of Magnus back on the screen for you. He's gonna work until he wants to have the tricorder,
Yeah.
like on Star Trek. You know what? The form factor of everything shrinking, and boy, what a deal that would be. You know, to come up with a Recco detector that's twice the size of a transceiver
Right.
would be a bargain. You know,
Yeah.
so there's great question. If I knew the answer, uh, I'd I'd be a really important guy. But it is a dream of Magnus and the whole Recco culture. Yeah, what could be better? So and the innovation's not stopping. They are always innovating, as even though what we have right now is great, it can always get better.
Yeah.
So
Great.
fun stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Howie, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All learned a lot. And folks, thanks to everybody who showed up and asked your great questions. It's really fun to have such an engaged crew here. So really appreciate you all showing up to these and your commitment to your continuing Avalanche education. Really appreciate you all. So I'll send out a recording of this to folks and we're going to post it on our YouTube channel as well. And thanks so much to Recco for being a wonderful partner to ARI and to Howie for being here to answer all these great questions tonight. Thanks, everyone.
See you later. Night night.